Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us. We have 40 minutes on the clock to really get our messages out when it comes to the blueprint for payment winners of the future. Thank you all once again for joining us. Right, I'd like to start off with a brief overview. I've given you very brief introductions. So Harry, you cover India and the UAE, and your headquarters, of course, is here in the UAE as well. Tell us a little bit about Pay10 and some of the, the evolution that you've seen across the two countries within the payment sector over the past 10 years or so.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. Yes, we have recently shifted our headquarters to UAE. We are still waiting on our licenses in UAE, and we want to focus from our headquarters over here. We want to focus on the MENA region, GCC in particular. We've had absolutely good growth in India. We've been there for almost 5 years now, a well-established company, licensed by the Reserve Bank of India, Central Bank of India. We've seen absolutely enormous growth when it comes to digital payments. I mean, nobody could have imagined doing such kind of transactions with the digital industry is doing in India right now, from the top enterprises to every small little vendor on the streets is using digital payments. I mean, it's a total evolution. And that's where we felt the need that we've been very successful in their journey. We have had a good growth, and we feel that our experience and our knowledge in that, we can take it forward to other regions.
And I suppose the UPI as well over in India, we're going to get to that in a little bit, but that's really completely changed everything, hasn't it? Let's move over to Sarvjeet. Tell us a little bit more about your company and Finvasia, of course, and you're a global company. You're headquartered, I understand, over in India. So what can you tell us about some of the markets you cover, the evolution, and your company as well?
Sure. Thank you, Laura. Thank you very much for inviting, and especially the IFC for setting up. Every year looks like the benchmark is, one after the other. Coming to Finvasia, so we are, an engineers as a background, and we have different verticals in financial services, investment banking, health tech, and obviously Fintech is our core. We have global offices in around 10 countries, but mostly based in India. In the last few years, I think the landscape of payments have massively been built up as an infra, but I still feel that there's a long way from here. I mean, every time we talk about blueprint, but looks like the fine print is becoming more critical, where we say that how do we put the right stepping stones for the next payment revolution. Sorry. And when we do that, as a part of Finvasia, we are predominantly in the payments and in capital market. We have just yesterday did our pre-launch for setting up one of the disruptive super app, which is again built up on AI and payments. So that's a quick synopsis of what we've been actively working on. And if you really talk about the overall landscape of payments, I feel that we have not even actually scratched the surface, because transfer of money was initially a value, but it turned out to be more a transactional, whereas the value still needs to be built on top of transactions. And this is where I feel that once we have the payment ecosystem gone to the tier 2, tier 3, or to a much larger audience where payments is like basics, and then we will talk about how the ecosystem will start adding value for each of us, and then we will say that yes, this is where then the next level of payment revolution will come into picture. So that's a quick, but I'm sure we'll talk a lot about this in the next few minutes.
Yeah, we're going to be touching on some of those subjects just a little later on. But first, let's move on over to Shane. A very warm welcome to you. You've come on all the way over from Singapore as well. You cover the APAC market. So tell us a little bit more about some of the trends you're witnessing and your business model as well, because I know it's a bit different.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Good morning. So Coda obviously started in Jakarta in Indonesia. We're now Singapore headquartered, around 450 people. We target a fairly specific part of the payments industry, so we help a lot of digital content and publishers and creators move transactions out of the $200 billion duopoly that is the Apple and Google App Store We started in Southeast Asia predominantly, but we're now in 65 markets. So actually, over the last 24 months, the fastest growing part of our business is here. So we have a team in Dubai that covers all of the MENA region, and we follow our clients wherever they want to improve their monetization.
Great. So could you maybe tell us a little bit more about some of the trends that you're witnessing within that as well?
Yeah, I mean, so payments by nature has been pushing global for many years now, but it's still kind of one market at a time. So it's getting increasing regulation, increasing scrutiny. There's been a lot of capital come into the space over the last 5 to 10 years. So you have a bunch of different companies trying to solve for the payments problem, which is everything from financial inclusion, targeting the underbanked and the unbanked, but also helping big, large global companies solve for the increasingly difficult challenges and complexities of working across 100+ territories, including emerging markets with currency restrictions or licensing restrictions or various other things that make doing business more difficult.
I mean, that's incredibly hard to navigate, of course, when you're global. So we're going to touch on those points a little later as well. Back to Harry. We mentioned India's UPI. A lot has been learned. A game changer for the country. A lot of countries around the world are also following this model. And also, there's been a recent introduction of ANI in the UAE, mirroring pretty much India's UPI. So how do you see other countries following suit? And maybe you could tell us a little bit more about India's UPI model as well.
So UPI has been a success story. UPI has completely, it's a revolution, if I rightly say it. And nobody had imagined the revolution would go. I mean, people view still, it was a very cash-oriented market. India was. I still remember, and I gave the data yesterday, in 2018, UPI did 5 billion transactions in the entire year. And last month, UPI did 13 billion transactions in 1 month. So that is a revolution. I mean, like I said previously, you go any part of India, you go any part of, from top enterprise merchants to right to the bottom, everybody is using UPI. So the evolution has been great. And I'm a strong advocate of ANI, and I believe ANI mirroring itself like UPI could be a huge, huge change in UAE as well. People need merchants in specifically, or merchants who are using the alternate payment methods need a solution which is as good as any other solution. At the same time, very, very good pricing. It's a competitive pricing market. And what ANI and UPI does it in India, and ANI could do the same in UAE, is get that pricing. People, the merchant really wants, even if it's an enterprise merchant or it's a street vendor or it's a merchant on a shop, everybody wants better pricing. And local payment methods can bring that pricing down. Not just that, it makes life easier. Money transfer makes it easier. Transferring from one mobile to another mobile. It's instant. It's the speed. It's the user journey. It's the experience. And majorly, countries are focusing on moving that shift of moving their population to use the local payment methods, which is the ANI in UAE, and we can even see that in Qatar. They're launching a Happach scheme, which is very similar to ANI. Oman is following that. ANI has also launched this local payment card scheme called J1. So I feel it's a complete revolution which will bring in the UAE. If they can match the user journey, if they can match the user experience, if top merchants help spread that payment method, it will be a game changer.
And so has that just been introduced here in the UAE?
Yes, indeed, yes. So there are about 10 banks who have been integrated right now. And then it's just been introduced. It's just in a very starting phase. But it can disrupt the market.
And it's following that success model over in India, of course.
Yes, yes.
Very interesting indeed. Sarvjeet, I wanted your take on this as well, of course, and continue the theme of the rise of the UPIs. In your mind, how has this transformed payment methods over in India? How are you seeing people follow suit? And what do you think we need to also be aware of as well? This is the second part of my question, especially when it comes to neobanks and super apps, because super apps, not many people have cracked this, but is that the way forward, do you think? So maybe those two-part question for you.
Yeah, sure. So to the first part, let's just quickly go back to the history of how we reached here. First there was an introduction of smartphones. Then there was an internet. Then we started moving to, and obviously India got the demonetization and COVID again, put that perspective. But if you really ask about it, the whole shift of how this ecosystem really matured and built up. And we also have to understand that, the larger demographic, the population which India has, all of us have always believed that how do we give that accessibility to tier 2, tier 3, or even tier 4 cities, right? So creating that infra and then bringing people on that infra is something which is not very easy when it comes to countries like India. And at the same time, once that happens, I think it's a ripple effect. You just keep having more and more people. And fortunately, because this was more of a P2P and P2M both, right? So the merchant also got that access, and everybody just transferred money. It's like you're walking into a store and, friends sitting together, and everybody could just budget, right? I mean, so the simplicity of getting it more accessible to everything we can think of, has really turned out UPI in one of the use cases. But I think that's not it. Because as I keep saying it, transferring of money is no value. I mean, obviously it used to be in the sense when we never had it. It's like once you've reached here, then you keep expecting more, you start thinking more. And this is where I believe this is exactly how most of the other, one problem, one app, or the payment apps which have really become quite, pioneers in India and globally as well, right? I mean, we have seen there are a lot of unicorns who have just created a payment solution, across the globe. But in India, the regulators really took that leap and created that basic infrastructure, and all these fintechs have started, saying, okay, I'm going to add value on top of it. So I still feel that, say investments, insurance, digital lending, payments, banking, everything is becoming so digital right now. And if we can really go back and see, can we create a more comprehensive ecosystem? Can we really go to any digital app and it's more super app based? The transactional ecosystem, again, is not going to be a value. And when we do that, all we are saying is we're creating so many financial digital footprints. It's just like Google's tracking us down for the longest time, or the digital marketing team, which has been looking at what we are trying to buy or make a transaction. Now all that suddenly moves on to your financial ecosystem. So anything you're doing, you're making payments, you are investing, you're looking forward for digital loans, and even to the transactional side, right? I mean, if you're making payments, we have always seen we really had to juggle it out and see how do I really, create some kind of categorization of my expenses. And this is where I believe that the next revolution, which again, we did a quick product demo yesterday for Jay, which is going to be building up on the transactional plus AI. And what it typically does is that anything you're doing, it's just looking at your transactions. And when it does that, how simple it would have been if you could ask a question on your transactions, right? I mean, and that's what I believe the value will be. And you're just going to an application just the way you go to Google and saying, hey, tell me the meaning of this. My kids do more voice on Google than me. Mm-hmm. My father does more digital transactions on the ecosystem than me, which is where I'm saying, the simplicity of these use cases, when they start finding their way, I think the fintech always look forward for opportunities, and they know that, hey, that's the problem statement, and how do we really fix it? And the evolution which is happening much faster than we thought is then again pushing fintechs to think more. And this is where I believe the neobank and the super apps will be good to have. They have always been there to some extent. We have seen some of the super apps, creating wonders by, you're doing e-commerce, you're doing travel, you can do anything. Mm-hmm. But the value which I believe was somewhat, missing, if the AI can really add that and ultimately empower the users. And I don't think we are in a stage where we need one problem, one solution, one app. I think we are more moving towards a more comprehensive solutions. My problem, my app, my solutions.
Very well said. AI, of course, is something we're going to have to talk about a little bit later. But as you mentioned, it's all about simplicity, a seamless customer experience at the end of the day, and everything in one sort of shot. Shane, let's talk a little bit about the evolution of digital commerce and digital content monetization. How have you responded to changes such as regulation? How do you navigate that? And do you feel that the rise of APMs has almost complicated the revenue growth for digital content creators then? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just for UPI, we support kind of 60 or 70 UPI equivalents in market. So, I mean, the drive towards real-time payments has been pretty spectacular over the course of the last 10 or 15 years. But of course, these networks don't interoperate. So if you're a company that wants to collect from consumers in India and in Europe and in Latin America via PIX or a local country equivalent, there's still quite a bit of complexity in getting it all to work together. Some don't support low-value transactions. Some don't support subscription billing, which is a big piece of digital content. So yeah, we're obviously working to try to make it harmonized for the end market that we serve. Regulations increased a lot, so payments activity is very strategic for many governments, particularly given how much it touches on capital flows and also promoting and attracting investment. So we've had to become increasingly more aware of what it takes to run a payments business, especially in emerging markets. So we're going through several kind of licensing application processes as we speak, including some things here in this region as well. So many of our customers want to work with regulated parties, particularly since digital content is also somewhat an item of national interest sometimes. So content publishers and video games and other content is often regulated it's in and of itself. So our clients have to be regulated, we have to be regulated, and we have to make it work together to make the service successful.
Can you maybe tell us a little bit more about the appetite comparisons over in the APAC region and then the Middle East? Is there any sort of appetite differences that you can see when it comes to gaming and content creation and things like that?
I mean, it's a big attractive space. Almost everyone is a secret gamer of some sort, or some mobile phone or some digital entertainment. So a lot of the big content creators started out of China, but the Middle East has often attracted a lot of investment as well, including acquisitions of some big Western publishers out of California in the US. So it is a global business. Obviously, it's one where two companies have controlled a great deal of the monetization for the last 10 or 15 years, $200 billion at a 30% kind of gross take rate. So it's very interesting for people to find other ways to get to the youth market, to the out-of-app monetization opportunity. So that's why we exist. In order to do that, we have to be able to serve all the different payments use cases and deal with the fact that some people still pay with mobile phone. And MENA and Asia are a collection of countries, so you have high digital penetration countries and very, very low digital penetration countries. So the payment landscape in Thailand is not anything like it is in Pakistan, for example.
Yeah, so interesting. Yep. Harry, back over to you. Now, your focus, of course, is on bringing the unbanked population into the economy. So tell us a little bit more about Pay10's expansion plans and how you're looking to make a real difference within the payment space as well, particularly when it comes to the evolution of domestic payments as well.
So Pay10 is really focusing on the unbanked population. We've done that in India. And now that we've applied for our expansion plan, as expansion plan, we applied for our license in this region in UAE. We've also applied for our license in Morocco. We are planning expanding in Qatar and Saudi and GCC region, Oman. So the idea is there is a certain population in which the bank does not focus on, and that population is for giving you an example of a throughput salary of 4,000 dirham, 5,000 dirham a month and below. That's where the focus is missing, and that's where the people are not using the population. They're more developed busy in using cash and just depend on cash. I think as a fintech company, we would like to partner with banks on focusing on those particular unbanked population to reduce the cash and bring them in the economy. So we are very focused. The numbers are huge in every country. Those workers who have come from different countries to work here and they want to remit money back home to their loved ones. So those are the people right now we need to focus on to bring them in the economy, bring them through our SVF license, which we'll apply once we get the SVF license. Get everybody an app, but the more important part is getting them onboarded on the app doesn't solve the purpose. Domestically, we have to create an ecosystem as well along with the merchants so that not only they can use the app to receive the money and send the money back home, but also that app can be used domestically as well. That is more important. So it's a two things which have to come together to create the usability. The usability is very important. Now that's where ANI and domestic payment methods and the local payment card schemes come in. We have to create that atmosphere. The platform has to be created. The ecosystem has to be created like it's created in India, that you can use that app, you can use UPI to make payments everywhere. So we really have to work with enterprise merchants, big merchants who can promote this payment scheme. We will help them onboard on ourselves and deploy QR code in their shops, in the big areas, everywhere. So once the money is received in the app, it has to be utilized. It has to be utilized either by sending money back home, or the person should be able to utilize that money domestically. So it's very important to create the domestic network as well. And domestic network can be created once we have the license, but we want to focus on customers using the money digitally, rather than once they get the money through WPS, they withdraw cash and they use the money. That needs to stop. How can we convince them? How can we create a user journey? What ecosystem can we create so that once the money comes into the app with WPS, how can the money be then used again digitally, rather than that money being converted into cash? So that's our focus. That's where Payton wants to focus. That's where Payton wants to use his expertise back in India, focus there, and how that money can stay in the economy and not go outside and become transformed into cash. Because if we cannot solve that use case, we'll be kind of in a position where we're not doing enough for the economy. Then what's the point of having a license if you're giving an app to somebody, he's receiving the money digitally and then making it to cash again? Then what problem are you solving? That's where we come in, and that's the expertise we want to use so that we can let that money, which is already digital now, it's in the economy, it's in the banking system, how it can remain in the banking system, and how it can be then transferred domestically and internationally through banking channels. That's the focus.
Very interesting model. I wanted to very quickly go over to Shane for just a moment, because I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the opportunities around out-of-app or web-based content monetization as well. And what are the key drivers for publishers, for example, to use outside primary app stores, out of these apps, basically? Well, what's the motivation and drive behind that?
Yeah, I think it's probably three things. One, it's incredibly expensive to deal with Apple and Google, so there's a pure economic motivation. I think the second one is there's lots of difficulty in people understanding their customer. If you give your customer to Apple or to Google, it's very restrictive. You don't get much marketing attribution information, and it's very closed ecosystem, which is starting to bother people as they want to get more sophisticated about user acquisition, and they want a deeper relationship with their customers. And I think the last one is, in almost every country in the world, the business practices of these two organizations is under pretty heavy scrutiny. I mean, more so in Europe than anywhere else, but even in places like Japan and Korea, it's just, it's making it difficult for companies to succeed when they have fewer choices. So that's why we exist, and it's not a very difficult sale in that respect, but actually how you do it and the degree to which people are willing to take business risk, but also develop the infrastructure and spend the money to create something. Because for all the business practice flaws of an Apple or a Google, the system does work very well. It has enormous reach and obviously a very, very loyal user base.
Very interesting. Right, Sarvjeet, back over to you. Let's talk about AI. You touched on it earlier. We have to talk about this. It's been spoken about across every single panel over the last 2 days, I can imagine. So how do we build value and work beyond payments when it comes to the use of AI? I was reading there's 780 languages over in India spoken. So that, for one, is revolutionary to especially when it comes to language barriers? And what about, the personalization of financial management and customization as well for retail clients? How important is that, and how can we use AI to leverage those issues?
Yeah, sure. I keep saying AI is for all, right? And in the current ecosystem, I think we are still trying to implement at a very high level, right? It really hasn't gone down too deep. And let's try to take a few examples. There are people across India with so many languages, and currently we have a challenge. And the challenge is AI only understands English, at least to some extent. The models have been built up on that particular language. Now, it would have been very simple, and one of the product which we talked about is what we're working on India right now is that can you really talk in your vernacular language about your data, right? So you've created all these digital ecosystem, and there are so many LLM models which typically work at a very different way, right? So currently we are working on four of the AI models. One is cognitive, predictive, generative, and explainable AI. Now, assume that there is a data which exists. There is an information about yourself which exists in a form of a data. And data is what? It's a transaction. It's I've made a payment to A, I'm making an investment to a particular stock, I wanted to take a digital loans, I have money lying in my bank, I don't know how can I really optimize it, what is my current return on investments, so on and so forth. There is so much which we always, keep thinking about whenever we look at our financial data. And this is where I believe that, once you have these different, cohorts of customers, there are different AI models which can really start adding value, not only for businesses, but also for clients. I mean, in our particular case, when we started implementing AI, the first thing we did, we had everybody in the office to learn of AI, right? I mean, if you're not having the AI agents within the organization, it becomes practically very difficult because then only selective people who are part of the core AI team will just start looking around. And once you do that, trust me, everyone is coming out and saying, can we identify what is the behavior of my user? Can we identify how can I do a more customized digital marketing to my team? Can we go out and understand that, how can we retain a client? Even in AI and HR, right? So I'm just deviating it, but I'm just getting into the core section of how AI can really get too deep in anything we are doing. Now, when we talk about these financial data points, right? I mean, everybody wants to know, talk, and have an output in their own language, right? And specifically when you are talking about India, where people are more comfortable talking in their own language. And, you drive 50 kilometers, the dialect, the language, again, changes of how this ecosystem is. And fortunately, AI can really create that simplified version. And then it also can create a lot of insights, right? And when you're asking, it just gives you what you want. And the explainable AI is something which is very interesting, and I've been closely working with that, is it explains the data, right? How simple it could be that you simply say, categorize my expenses and tell me how can I budget my next month, right? So the predictability side of it. And once you do that, I think the AI can really help you create wealth. Ultimately, the whole ecosystem of fintech is to save money or to make money, both of the sides, right? So saving is because you are now saving your time when it comes to making these payments. You don't have to go to banks. You don't have to do a physical effort to move the money. That saves your time and productivity. Same is the case. Once you have the money, you want to do more with it. I mean, how can you get better with money? How can you get better? And I believe that the whole AI ecosystem, once they start building it on all these basic transactional ecosystem which exists, and I keep saying it that it used to be a value when we never had it. But now we have those digital footprints. I think the value will be how can I know more about my data points, and can someone really explain me in my language? And once you do that, I think people will start trusting it, because ultimately, these are the models, these are tested and tried, ecosystem which people don't know. I mean, if I'll say that I will ask a question and I will get an answer, nobody believed that from Google for the longest time. But how the ecosystem evolved, they knew that yes, I mean, it can give you, and I believe the same is what will happen in AI in a fintech. Once people start adapting it, once companies start adapting it, and they will come up with the use cases which will really solve the problems, I think that is where the world is moving, and that is where I believe the AI ultimately will have more multi-language models. Generative AI again is something, right? I mean, if you could just put in a data and just gives you a data out. So I think a lot is happening. I am very strong believer of, though obviously there is a lot of security concern, it doesn't come very easy. We have seen how deep fakes, everything is a bit scary at times, but I think we will all get adapted to it. We will all have, more security features to push the wrong side of AI as well. But on the fintech side, I'm very optimistic. I believe that this can really empower the users to do more with money, to get better with money, and ultimately, that's what we spend all our time, and I think it's going to be very, very great.
Perfect. And yeah, very exciting time and so much opportunity ahead, especially when it comes to AI and the changes that we're going to see. Very exciting indeed. Harry, back over to you. I'd like to focus on the UAE for a moment. Now, in line with the 2030 vision, the transformation vision, 7 key pillars were actually announced just last year, I believe. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about those key pillars, and what do we need to take into account when it comes to the future of payments integrated into this vision?
So we can talk about, as in we as a company can talk about what we can bring into that vision. The main focus of the vision is to create the digitization, is to bring in that, like I previously spoke about, how do we bring in the economy, the cash in the economy, how do you reduce the usage of cash. Mind you, UAE has been very good in getting out of the FATF list. So compliance becomes a very important aspect as well. So when compliance becomes a very important aspect, there is in fact a more need to digitize the economy. So fintechs can really help in doing that. How do we bring in that economy? I think our domestic focus, which we are focusing on, and targeting on the unbanked population will help achieve success to our company and contribute to the vision, 2020 vision, which we have for the UAE.
Very exciting time. There's another question I wanted to add just off the back of this, because I was reading that the payments, the payments sector, in terms of investment into payments, it's still one of the top areas of investment globally. However, investments have actually fallen about 25% in the last couple of years. Can you comment on maybe some of the reasons behind that, what we need to do to encourage investors into the payment space?
So investors have really changed their mindset, how they were looking at fintech companies now. Previously, we could see investors were putting a lot of money in fintechs. But now investors are looking at right strategic fintech companies and payments companies. The most important factor, the investors now is, especially in India, which we see, right? Investors want to invest in companies who are making money. Previously, companies were becoming unicorn, valuation 4 billion, 5 billion, 10 billion, 12 billion, 14 billion, but at the end of the day, they're not making profit. Now, the investors have really changed their mindset. They want to see companies who are actually making money on transactions. And I can always say, to my CEO, to my asset list, we need to focus on making money on transactions and how we can make money on transactions. That is more important. That's what investors are looking at. What happens is payment companies in past became very creative and changed their path from focusing money on making money on transactions, then doing everything else apart from making money on transactions, trying to become an e-commerce on their platform, trying to resell certain things, trying to create platforms. That's all fine. But the core business of payments company is to make money on transactions. So investors are really focusing on companies who are making money on transactions, they can see a profitable growth, they can see a profitable future. That's what's changed now. Apart from that, compliance has become a key factor. Investors do not want to invest in companies whose key focus is not compliance. Because compliance is the next way forward when it comes to India, when it comes to UAE, like I talked about FATF, the red list. Now the central bank regulators are really focusing. The key focus is on compliance. Again, if you can make a lot of profit, you're not compliant, again, there is a problem. So I think investors are looking at I do not think that they don't want to, the focus is still on payments, but the focus has changed now, of more focused, less focused on numbers and GMVs and the turnover and how much transactions we are doing. The focus is now on the profitability and compliance, because that really would affect their investment. If the company is not compliant, they may lose their license, they may go in some kind of a problem in the license with the regulator. So the investments are really focusing on those two key points. And if a company is really focused on those key points, investors are really interested.
Good to know. Over to you, Shane. Bringing it back to monetizing content, what are the channels that matter the most today? And maybe you could give us your take on the investment side of things as well, and what investors are looking out for.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's hard to argue with the things that Harry said, right? So we often say we're in the trust business to begin with. I mean, we're handling money on behalf of insensitive markets and difficult areas for, in many cases, large, publicly listed businesses. So they want to work with a regulated player. They want to understand and know how we move the money around, and of course, they want to know that the service is robust. So I think probably the key differentiator is people that build a really robust network in order to manage not just payment acceptance, but everything that comes along with it when you're in the content space. So we pay local taxes on behalf of publishers. We do local customer service. We use local banking infrastructure where we can. So I think that's one of the things that matters the most in trying to build a lasting, sustainable business. And I think investors also solving for the emerging market challenge is still very attractive to people. It's also quite scary. Over the past few years, there's been quite a lot of geopolitical tension and other things that make it, people are a little bit more cautious about the type of businesses that they want to invest in. And so, we're fortunate that people like the space that we're in. It's digital content, it's everywhere. People understand the business model, and people like the idea of bringing more transactions kind of local and away from, again, the big duopoly.
Brilliant. We only have a couple of minutes left, so Sarvjeet, your final question. How else are payments moving into every sort of vertical when it comes to investment and lending? And as we mentioned, payments and lending received the largest shares of total fintech funding last year. However, funding payments has significantly dropped over the last couple of years. So maybe, what you could tell us a little bit more about what needs to be done to secure more funding.
So I think first we need to understand that the benchmark for growth is not funding, right? And that's where initially there was probably a cut copy model where we have seen a lot of countries, a lot of companies trying to see that if it works there, it will work for me, or this will work for this particular user case or markets. I think that testing phase have gone out. The investors have realized, though we have never raised capital, so I don't know how investors think, but my perspective is that it has to be value driven. Ultimately, all of us are looking, and I believe, as a company as well, our objective is that how can I add value to my client? And part of it, I strongly believe, is the customization, right? I mean, if I'm creating something which is there as a larger extent and everybody is also offering the same, how will you really create that stickiness? How will you make sure that the life of a user, of a client, is much larger with you? And obviously, once you have that client, there are more opportunities, right? I mean, I keep saying it that yes, customization, at times cross-selling also helps for fintechs, because as rightly mentioned, that you can't step away from your core business. You continue to work on that, but you also see that with such a heavy evolution happening in the whole fintech world. Technology becomes outdated by the time you create your mobile application. That's the kind of change which is happening. AI again is something, we have built up models, and 6 months down the line, all them will be obsolete. So my particular perspective would be, don't chase for investments. Continue to focus on what your core strength is. If you have really done well, there is no second reason. It might take few more months or maybe more time for you to, reach to a level where, you feel confident of what you've done. But at the same time, I think that once your product is validated, users will create that ripple for you, and there is no reason that you can't raise capital. But I again said, raising capital is no benchmark for growth, right? You need to focus on what you have and then diversify. That's very important in this market within your vertical, but at the same time, to be able to reach to the growth what you want.
Some brilliant advice there. Sadly, that is all we have time for. Thank you so much. Some brilliant conversations there and some brilliant takeaways. We really do hope you enjoyed our session here today, our first session here on Plenary 2. If you do have any further questions, I'm hoping our speakers will be here just after the session now. So thank you so much. Let's hear it for our panel. Thank you.